never made it, but I know what it takes. I'm motivated by a mix of emotion. Got my statement, and I'm reading it slow so I can understand it fully. Appreciate my standing, go out of this world and right on time. Oh, never in my life have I seen the sky light up like this. I'm far away from Earth and I wanna know if you exist. Mission control, do you read me? Send me my coordinates lately. Mission control, am I drifting? Tie me to someone who will love me, yeah. Wait, I think I'll last a bit longer. Fine.
Welcome everyone. Welcome everyone. Welcome everyone to another Ref Brandon and the Todd family YouTube video. Wherever you are, whatever you may be doing, thank you so much for making Ref Brandon and the Todd family part of your day. We always greatly appreciate it. Happy Sunday to everybody out there. Hopefully you have enjoyed your weekend so far, and as we always do during football season, I want to recap and review some of the games from yesterday. Not all the games, because obviously there are a lot of games. No matter how many games are good on paper or how many games that end up being good that we don't expect to be good, there are always 15 to 25, maybe 15 to 30 games every Saturday that you can look on the schedule for the day and say, well, they're going to win, they're going to win, they're going to win, because you know going into the game that it's an uneven matchup, and you know the team that's better is not just better, but they're way better. I don't want to talk about those games. To me, it's a waste of time to talk about a game when the team that won, you knew before the game they were going to win. I like to talk about the games that either we weren't sure who was going to win, whether it looked good on paper, or we weren't sure who was going to win because it shouldn't have been a good game, but it ended up being a good game. Any thoughts on anything from yesterday, please feel free to let me know. I also want to mention a couple of games from Friday night, because normally on Friday nights we only have one or two games. There were actually 4 games Friday night, but I'm only going to talk about 2 of them. NC State defeated Virginia 24-21. NC State's now 3-1 on the season. It's their, I believe, 12th straight season of starting 3-1 or better. But I was thinking on Friday that even though Virginia is terrible, NC State plays the kind of football that will allow the Cavaliers to stay in the game, and it did. But it shouldn't have, because Virginia is flat out awful. I still don't understand why Brennan Armstrong transferred to NC State. I know he wanted out of Virginia because they were terrible last year, and they're beyond terrible this year, and you don't want your last year of collegiate football to be played for a team that sucks that bad. And I know he knew NC State he could start, because last year's starter, Devin Leary, transferred to Kentucky, and you don't want to transfer from a team where you're starting to go somewhere else as a backup. So when Devin Leary announced he was transferring, I think Brennan Armstrong knew right away, hey, if I go there, I'll start, and he is. But Dave Doran runs the kind of offense, no matter who the play caller is, he's going to be conservative. He's going to have 7, 8, 9-minute drives, and he'll be fine settling for a field goal every drive. Brennan Armstrong likes to drop back and throw the ball 55 times a game. And in Raleigh, that's just not going to happen. But maybe if they win 7 or 8 games, he'll still be okay because Virginia is not going to win 2 games. Boise State gets back to 500 on the season by defeating San Diego State 34-31. And then yesterday, the noon games, Oklahoma defeated Cincinnati 20-6. To me, I knew Oklahoma was going to win that game. This is not last year's Cincinnati or 2 years ago Cincinnati. This Bearcat team is a 6-win team, 7-win team maybe. But I was surprised and shocked that Oklahoma only scored 20 points because in the first 3 games their offense looked really good, but they weren't really playing a team that had a defense to stop them. So maybe Oklahoma hasn't improved too much on offense from last season. I guess we'll find out as the season goes on and they continue playing tougher teams. But 4-0 is still 4-0. And then Florida State defeats Clemson 31-24 in overtime. 2 plays in the game decided the game. Clemson was leading. I believe it was 24-17, and they were driving. They were at least in range to attempt a field goal, but Cade Klubnik got sacked, and he fumbled, and Florida State picked it up and ran it back right around 55 yards, and that tied the game. So we gave Florida State that 7 points, and then with about 2 minutes to go in regulation, Clemson tries a 29-yard field goal, and they miss it. And then Florida State wins the game in overtime. So defense, to me, played great. Florida State scored 17 points in regulation, and you're talking about a team that's probably going to average 40 points or better per game this year. So to hold them to 17 points, I have no problem with the defense at all. Now, Florida State's last drive of the first half, we played prevent defense, and that never works. So on that drive, our defense was atrocious. But outside of that, the defense played phenomenal. When you hold Florida State to 17 points in regulation, I'm not going to complain. There were 3 or 4 calls on offense that I personally thought were bad calls. But if those 2 plays I just talked about go differently, those 3 or 4 calls on offense really don't matter. I think what it boils down to is a few years back, I had a friend of mine, and he told me when Clemson had Trevor Lawrence, he said, y'all better enjoy the winning while it's happening, because with Deshaun Watson and Trevor Lawrence, y'all have a back-to-back, once-in-a-generation player, and once Trevor leaves, this Clemson reign is going to end. And I was hoping he was wrong. I wanted so bad for him to be wrong, but it appears he was right, because talent-wise, they still have just as good of talent now as they had then. But the difference is back when Deshaun was there and Trevor was there, games like yesterday, even though you gave Florida State that defensive touchdown and you missed that chip shot field goal, if you had Deshaun or Trevor, they're still going to go out there in the fourth quarter or overtime and make enough plays to win the game. Now, we don't have those players. Games that used to be fourth quarter games that you had confidence you could win, now fourth quarter games, you're like, you know what? If the other team doesn't cost themselves, we're not going to win this game. A lot of the Clemson fans are mad at Phil Mafah because he missed the block that caused Klubnik to fumble the ball. And Dabo even said that Mafah missed the block, and you can go back and watch the replay and see he did. The guy came from the right side, unblocked, and he nailed Cade. But the problem is, as a quarterback, you're supposed to sense that pressure. And not only that, he was coming right in Cade's face. He wasn't behind him, he was in front of him. So how can you look at the guy coming at you and just stand there? You can't just stand there and take that hit with the guy that's coming at you that fast, unblocked. You have to do something. You can't just stand there. But Mafah did miss that block. But Clemson better hope they win at Syracuse next Saturday, because they've still got to play Miami and North Carolina and Notre Dame, and that's just the best teams left on the schedule, not the other teams. If they lose to Syracuse this upcoming Saturday, this might be about a 6-win team in Clemson this year. Syracuse, speaking of them, they defeat Army 29-16. Texas A&M defeats Auburn 27-10. So Jimbo Fisher should be okay as far as being on the hot seat for another week. The Aggies are now 3-1. Oregon just beats the ever-loving dog doo-doo out of Colorado 42-6. And maybe Colorado gets blown out again this week, and we no longer have to hear about Deion Sanders for a while. That game was over pretty much before it started, and I seen on social media some of Dan Lanning's pregame speech to Oregon, and a lot of people are up in arms about it, but honestly, I don't know what he said that was so bad or wrong. To me, everything he said was factually correct, so why are we mad at somebody for not giving an opinion but telling you something that's factually correct? Alabama defeats Ole Miss 24-10, and Alabama's offense looked a little bit better, but still not great. But Lane Kiffin, once again, in a big game, just didn't show up. Illinois, in a close game, defeats Florida Atlantic 23-17. Nebraska defeats Louisiana Tech 28-14. And I bring that game up because Nebraska played their first 3 games this year with Jeff Sims at quarterback. Now, Jeff Sims is the Georgia Tech transfer. And I don't know exactly what happened, but when Jeff Sims came out of high school, supposedly there was a ton of teams wanting him, and he was the next big thing at quarterback. And he's never been as good as he was supposed to be. But the longer he was in college, the worse he got. And I thought leaving Georgia Tech, going to Lincoln would help him. It didn't. First 3 games this year, he was a turnover machine. Nebraska changed quarterbacks yesterday, and their offense looked a lot more crisp. Louisville wins again. They defeat Boston College 56-28. West Virginia wins again. They defeat Texas Tech 20-13. West Virginia has become a throwback team because unlike most teams now, they're not depending on the passing game. They're depending on the running game. They're only throwing the ball now 20 times a game. I think yesterday they had less than 100 yards passing, but they're winning, so they should be okay with that. Utah defeats UCLA 14-7. Now, Utah has always had problems in September. If we recall, last year, I believe they lost all 3 of their regular season games in September, but it might have been 2 in September and 1 in early October. But they had all their losses early in the season, and the longer the season went, the better they got. Right now, they're right around top 10. If they get by the next week or 2 without losing, we better watch out for Utah. Maryland defeats Michigan State, and Michigan State is just flat out awful. But Maryland's now 4-0. They are slowly but surely getting better year after year under Mike Locksley. And Furman defeats Mercer 38-14. I bring that game up because I actually did a Furman preview before the season started and told everybody that I think Furman has a really good year this year, and they are off to a 3-1 start. So I continue to think Furman is about an 8-win team this year. And then Tennessee Tech defeats Kennesaw State 17-7. And the reason why I bring that game up is because I have family that live just outside of Cookeville, which is where Tennessee Tech's campus is. So, since I have family up in that area, I always enjoy seeing Tennessee Tech do good. So, seeing them get a win last night, 17-7, is good. Georgia Tech defeats Wake Forest 30-16. I think it's obvious that Georgia Tech is now going in the right direction. I also think it's obvious that Wake Forest misses Sam Hartman big time. LSU defeated Arkansas 34-31. This is a game that LSU, I knew going in, was a better team that would win, but I honestly didn't think it would be that close. And then Florida defeats Charlotte 22-7. And the only reason I bring that game up is because Florida continues to just spit and sputter on offense, but they are 3-1. But I still say they're only about a 6-win team because they just cannot move the ball effectively, efficiently, consistently enough on offense. In a game with ranked Pac-12 versus ranked Pac-12, Washington State defeated Oregon State 38-35. Wazoo actually got out to a huge lead in the game. Oregon State tried to make a late comeback, but it just wasn't good enough. So Wazoo wins the game 38-35. Ohio State defeated Notre Dame 17-14. And this game was actually Ohio State 3, Notre Dame for a long time. And I know on Thursday when I was previewing the games, I said that Ohio State's defense, in my opinion, was going to be much improved this year. We were going to see it get better and better as the year goes on. And Notre Dame scored 14. I know Ohio State held Notre Dame to 10 last year, but the Notre Dame offense under Sam Hartman is a lot better than it was last year. So holding this year's team to 14 is more impressive than holding last year's team to 10. But Ohio State's always had a great offense. It's always been their defense holding them back. But if you look at their DC's track record, everywhere he goes, the longer he stays, the better his defenses get. So that's why I expect Ohio State to, if not have a top 10 defense this year, be close. And we know they're going to score points. So Ohio State should have another really good year this year. It was actually Notre Dame 14, Ohio State 10. And Ohio State scored the game-winning touchdown of what looked like on the last play of the game on a 1-yard touchdown run. But they put 1 second back on the clock. But the Buckeyes win the game 17-14. And then a game that looked like it was going to be close on paper, and it should have been close because both teams are known for having a really good defense. And when you see two good defensive teams play, you expect a close game. In this case, it didn't happen. Penn State defeated Iowa 31-0. I think Iowa had 66 yards of offense, which is just flat out embarrassing. But their top two running backs were out. And when you're Iowa and you live and die with defense and running the ball, and all of a sudden you can't run the ball, you're doomed going into the game unless you cause a lot of turnovers and get cheap touchdowns. But going into the season, Iowa said they were going to try to score 325 points this year, which would be an average of 27 points a game. They're not getting there. But this day and time, with football being an offensive game, 27 points a game still ain't nowhere near good enough to win a championship. But they're talking about 27 points a game total, not just on offense. They're including special teams touchdowns and defensive touchdowns. I think right now they're 121st in the country in offense. So their offense just continues to be atrocious. But they play such good defense that they still win 7 or 8 games a year despite having no offense whatsoever. South Carolina defeats Mississippi State 37-30. A really, really, really good game. It was 27-27, and the Gamecocks end up winning the game late. Missouri defeats Memphis 34-27, so Missouri stays undefeated on the season. And then the team that Missouri beat last week on that game-winning field goal at the end of regulation, Kansas State, they defeat Central Florida 44-31. And then the only late game that I'll mention is USC, only because they played at 10:30 Eastern Time last night against Arizona State, and it should have been a blowout, but it wasn't. USC allowed Arizona State to hang around, stick around, stay in the game, but USC wins 42-28, and USC and Colorado both have a fast turnaround because they play each other at noon on Saturday, which is 10 o'clock a.m. Colorado time and 9 o'clock a.m. in Southern California. But I believe the game's in Colorado, but that is early for a Pac-12 kick. But the Pac-12 is the best conference in football this year, and if you're going to get noticed and get recognized, you're going to have to play before 10 o'clock Eastern Time on a Saturday night. So I don't blame them for doing this. It's just going to seem strange playing a game that's that early in the morning over on the West Coast. Any thoughts on any of this, please feel free to let me know. Homes for Our Troops is a publicly funded 501c nonprofit organization that builds and donates specially adapted custom homes nationwide for severely injured post 9/11 veterans. Since the 2004 inception, nearly 90 cents of every dollar spent has gone directly to our program services for veterans. Visit at hfotusa.org. Let's go ahead and get our dad joke of the day in here. What did the tree say when spring finally arrived? What a relief. And that does it for today's Ref Brandon and the Todd Family YouTube video. Until next time, it's Ref Brandon saying, just like in pro wrestling, life can be over by the count of 3. Tell your friends and family how much you love them. Bye.